Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Let's Talk Yoga podcast. I hope you are doing well. Before I get into today's episode, I want to take a quick moment to remind you that I have reduced my frequency of posting on Instagram just because it's a medium I honestly have no control over, and everybody ends up becoming a slave to the algorithm. And I'm not in that phase of life where I want to really chase those numbers as metrics of my success in yoga or my own worth in my practice and my teaching. So I've moved to creating more long form content, which I'll share via the newsletter. You can sign up by going to my link in my bio on Instagram, or just go to the podcast description wherever you are listening to this podcast and click on the sign up for newsletter. I'm someone who doesn't like getting a lot of emails, so I don't send out many as well. But occasionally when I do come up with some long form content that is not limited by a 90-second reel video, I will send that out to you. I'm also going to be doing a free workshop coming soon, and I'd be announcing that to the list first. Okay, so just make sure you get signed up for that, and you are good to go. Okay, we can remain connected without ever wondering if tomorrow the algorithms will change and we no longer are connected. Okay, so that's one. Secondly, I've been a little slow at work. You know that if you've heard last week's or a couple of weeks back podcast episode, you know I have been in this phase of figuring out what to do with this ACL tear. At this point, the surgeon has confirmed that it is a complete tear, and there's also some meniscus tearing there that they need to take care of. So we're looking at surgery at the end of February. I don't have a date yet, but all things considered, I'm doing well, and I've finally gone back to working in a capacity that I enjoy. And in this new phase of having more time open up for myself, I have been working on a couple of new workshops that I want to offer to you, as well as indulging in some extra study time. Okay, so in today's episode, I have a friend of mine who happens to also be a yoga teacher. His name is Pavel Dmitriev. We've known each other for almost a decade now. Pavel and I met in yoga class when I had just started Aham Yoga, and he had come to explore. We've been in touch since. He is a yoga teacher. He is mainly associated with the art of living, but his daytime job is he's a VP of a data science company here in Seattle called Outreach. And his journey has always fascinated me. He's literally one of those people who I know yoga is his life for him. And he started in his undergraduate days. He was born and raised in Russia until he moved out for further studies to America. And he had a lot of stage fright in terms of, when he used to be on stage for his music performances. And that's when he found a book on yoga and decided to give it a shot. And he says it worked like magic for him. A few minutes of breathing before a performance would really change how he felt on stage. And I, as a performer, I can completely relate to that. And those early experiences in his undergrad days got him really interested and connected to yoga. He started exploring more. He started studying more. And when he moved here to America for graduate studies, he got into the art of living, and he likes blending a few different styles of yoga to create fresh and fun and deep experiences in yoga classes. And he has a lot of experience teaching yoga to corporates, okay, right from Microsoft to Yahoo to Google to Cisco to IBM and so many more. And he very actively uses yoga to promote health and to help people increase productivity in the corporate world. And I'm so excited that Pavel is on the show. I can't believe it's taken us so long to get him on. We talk about managing the mind or controlling the mind. I don't look at control as a negative thing. I actually think of it as a very enhancing, helpful tool. We looked at how to manage the mind through yoga, and we have a conversation about just the different layers of the mind, the obstacles to practice, the approaches, how to manage the mind, and so much more. So I really hope you enjoy this conversation with Pavel Dmitriev. I will see you next week with another episode. And please remember, the only way to support this free resource is to leave us ratings and reviews on your podcast apps. That's what will really help support this show. It helps us keep it ad-free. So I really hope that you'll take a moment to do that. Enjoy today's conversation. I'll see you on the other side. Hi, Pavel. Welcome to the Let's Talk Yoga podcast.
Hi, Arundhati. I'm glad to be here. Listen to some of your podcasts. They're very interesting. I'm excited to be part of it.
What the listeners don't know is that you and I go back a long way, almost 8 years, I think, if not longer, when I first met you, when you walked into Aham Yoga, which was so new back then. And I was just getting started. Actually, that was, close to 9 years ago. And we've been what I call yoga friends since. And I've already, in the intro of the show, gone through your bio, so the listeners already know a lot about you. And you and I are going to talk about the mind and the view of the mind in yoga, okay? And how to control the mind. And control sounds like a very strong word, but more like managing the mind through the practice of yoga, through the tools of yoga. So where do you want to start? Because the mind has so much to it, right? How does yoga view the mind? Just as if we zoomed out, what is the mind according to yoga?
Yeah, so I think the first sort of a principle in yoga that there is more to us than just our body, right? That we are not just the body walking around and the brain and so on. And in yoga, there is this classification. It's called Pancha Kosha. Pancha means 5. So there's the 5 layers. And the first layer, the Annamaya Kosha, is the body. And then there is Pranamaya Kosha, so the prana, the energy, which is separate from the body. Mm-hmm. And then there is Manomaya Kosha, which you could translate as a mind, one way to view the mind. And then there is also Vijnayanmaya Kosha, which is the feelings, and often feelings is combined with the mind. And then Anandmaya Kosha, the self, or the consciousness. So in yoga, it's this system, and mind is part of this whole system. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of interesting to think, so what are the functions of the mind? What does the mind actually do? And there are several, and I think in different books on yoga and different scriptures, actually, they classify things a little differently. But some of the functions are perception. Actually, we often think that, say, we are listening, it's our ears that are listening, or we are seeing, it's our eyes that are seeing. But actually, it's not the ears, it's not the eyes, those are just the mechanisms, it's actually the mind. Mm-hmm. Right? So, like someone, I guess you may be listening to this podcast now, but maybe you find it a little boring and your thoughts go to some problem at work or some personal problem. And then you find yourself, oops, what was just said? I was there, the ears were working, but I didn't actually hear. It's a common situation, happen very often. And because it's really the mind that perceives the outside world. Yeah, and then there is also the function of decision making. So making decisions, that's also the mind, the intellect part of the mind, where we judge and label things and decide what to do. Yeah, mm-hmm. And then also various behavior patterns and thoughts and memories and behavior patterns. It's also all stored in the mind. And the feelings, we can also say, are in the mind. So actually, the mind is quite complex. So many things are going on in the mind. Maybe that's why it's so hard to control and so hard to manage.
So where does morality come into this? Would it go into thoughts, emotions, feelings? Like where the part of us that says this is right behavior or good behavior or acceptable behavior, this is, okay, no, this is not ethical. Do we want to get into that now or later?
Yeah, it's we can certainly talk about this. I feel this is part of the mind. This is the intellect part of the mind. This is what decides what is right and what is wrong. And also decides what to do. We don't actually always do what is right. Often we know what is right, but we don't do it. So that whole value kind of system is part of the mind.
Mm-hmm. 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 So if someone wants to manage their mind through yoga, right, where should they begin? And I would also throw in a second question that just if someone's very new to yoga, I'm assuming they would start at a different point versus somebody who's more experienced, like, say, you or me, or someone who's been doing yoga for a while, but we need to work on our mind more. So where does one start? Or where should one start for quick results, if that's a thing?
Well, I don't know about quick results. My personal opinion that for almost everything, we should not be looking for quick results. We should be looking for long-term results. And in fact, to get the long-term results, often you go the opposite direction of the quick results. Mm-hmm. But where to start about managing the mind? I feel we have to start from getting close to the mind. Like, to me, this is actually one important part of yoga. In general, it sort of brings you closer to yourself. It's the same for the body also. And I think the kind of the challenge that we have is that we often kind of dislike our mind or our body. Right? We think, say, for the body is very clear. We think, oh, I'm overweight. I want to be
so true.
Like more flexible. I want to be stronger. And that creates that feeling of dislike, which actually creates a distance, creates a separation. And the same goes for the mind. That we often think, oh, my mind is so messy. I cannot focus. There are all these thoughts which would not go away. It's ironically actually applies more to people who practice yoga and meditation. Because people who don't, they don't pay attention. They don't care, pretty much. But once you start paying attention, like that attitude of not liking the mind, blaming the mind for things that happen in our life comes in, and we have to overcome that. And that's what I feel yoga really helps in how we practice the asanas and the meditations and breathing techniques. They help us accept the mind, the body, the feelings as they are. And that's the starting point for change, because if we don't accept it, we can't really change it. We have to accept it first.
I really like how you said you have to manage the mind, you first have to get close to the mind and really understand. Sometimes I say this, and I'm not going to say it really well in this moment, but paraphrasing, I talk about first you have to see how weak you are to see how strong you can become, like purely physically, right? Or how tight you are to become more flexible. And to see how mindless you are, right? And or how you just have no idea. You're so sensory driven that you don't know that your mind is so full. How can you be mindful when it's full of other things? So I really like this concept of accept it, acknowledge it, accept it. Then you can actually start working for those long-term results, right? So the mind fascinates me. I know it fascinates you too. It's the potential we have with it is tremendous, right? I mean, never has there been more literature on meditation and more apps on meditation and resources and courses and wonderful teachers and so much body of information and knowledge and wisdom is there. Yet, more people struggle to meditate and give up. And they're just like, oh, I tried to meditate and my head was full of thoughts. They don't understand that that's where they actually have to start. What I'm trying to get to in a very long-winded way here is, why is our mind so troubled? And is there any way we can reduce the input or the problems we self-create for the mind as we attempt to get closer to it.
Yeah, so I think just first maybe a quick comment.
Please, go ahead.
We have to get close to it. Anyway, and then we can start reducing it. It's sort of in that order.
Okay.
In my opinion, but why is the mind so troubled? I feel that one big reason is stress. Is that we just have so much more stress in our life now, and stress means there is more impact, there is more demands on our time, on what we need to do, and there is kind of always that feeling that there is too much. We don't have, because that's really a definition of stress, is when the demand is bigger than our capacity to do things. Because we are not really stressed about something that's very easy for us to do and we have enough time. It's when the demand starts exceeding the capacity, then we feel stressed. And that creates a lot of tension, a lot of thoughts, a lot of worries and anxiety in the mind. So how to deal with that? When actually just from this definition, there is really only two ways, right? We either have to decrease the demand or we have to increase the capacity.
So how do we decrease the demand?
Yes, and decrease the demand generally doesn't work. I guess in the past, yogis could go into a cave and sit there for a couple dozen years. But unfortunately, not an option for most of us.
Correct.
So really the only way is we have to increase our capacity, which essentially increasing our energy level. And yoga can really help with. In fact, a lot of yoga practice is about increasing the energy level. That's that level of prana, maya kosha, of how can more prana, more energy. And asanas, pranayamas, meditation, they all actually raise the level of prana. In fact, pranayama actually quite literally mean housing the prana, bringing in more prana. So yoga is, and that's why even without actually understanding too much, you just come to a yoga class, you do something, and then when you go back, even though you actually did work, right? You did posture, did asanas, and technically should be more tired, but you feel more energized. That's because the level of prana is increasing. So that's, I think yoga can really help in that way, in increasing the energy level. Then there is also another aspect to it. And there is that aspect, that tendency to the mind to vacillate between the past and the future. Like if you think about what are we actually thinking about, all those thoughts in the mind, they're either about the past or about the future. Like 99% of it.
True. Yes.
Occasionally we are just truly focused in the present moment when we are like in a state of flow. In a yoga class sometimes as well, or in meditation. But really, mostly in daily life, this is the past or the future. And then all of the negative emotions are actually also associated with the past and with the future. Right? So when the mind goes to the past, it's regret, or maybe it's feeling some sadness that we had some pleasant moment, but right now it's not here.
It's not so pleasant, yes.
Right? Maybe anger about something or someone. And when it goes to the future, is anxiety, it's worry. So that also creates a lot of stress on the nervous system and a lot of busyness. A lot of busyness in the mind. Yeah.
No, so I was just going to add how I liked how you said you cannot decrease the input, right? Because that's going to be, because that's what a lot of people try to do. They try to decrease the input, but you said instead focus on increasing capacity and working on the tools that will make your prana, your energy stores of prana really thrive. And I really enjoy that perspective, because you know this, how your everything is regulated by prana, right? And the fact
Mhm.
that we're blinking as we're recording this, or the thoughts in our what a lot of people, Pavel, I realized, don't know is that prana controls your thoughts. So if you're having more negative thoughts or pessimistic thoughts or regretful, all those what society classifies as negative emotions, right? Or thoughts, that's because your prana is depleted in some way. And in the same way, if your prana stores are abundant and everything is flowing, you are more sattvic in nature, right? And I
Mhm.
don't think
Yeah.
people, I,
Mhm.
I don't think it's spoken enough about how, if your mind is feeling a certain way, work on your prana, uh, which is what you're saying, which I think is so important for people to pause on, because you can do asana. And yes, asana also improves your prana, right? That's why you feel a certain way after
Mhm.
asana.
Yep.
But to truly get close to the mind, you have to work on your prana. And I'm glad you brought that up, because it is something that people, they skip over. I don't know if this is your experience in teaching, but what I've noticed is people do asana because it's available, it's good for you, all of that. They jump over pranayama and they go to meditate, or they just jump and go to meditate. Whole day has been messy. 5 minutes they close their eyes and they're trying to drop into that zone, but the mind needs more time to exit slowly. Um, so I just wanted to say, I really enjoy that thought of check your prana and work on your prana. And you said there's pranayama, there's meditation. There are so many other tools we can get into to regulate your uh, prana.
Yes,
So,
absolutely. And the level of prana actually, like you are saying, has such a big impact on like the quality of our life in general. So it's not just about during the yoga practice.
mhm, mhm,
Uh, it's like like I work as a data scientist, right? And suppose my boss comes to me with another project to do,
uh-huh,
right? I already have like 5 projects, and here is one more. And then really it's the two options. So if my prana is low, I already feel overburdened and tired. And I would just have such a negative reaction to
mm,
this. Like, oh my God, I have so many things to do. Now there is more. I view it as a burden. All my mood goes negative. Yeah. So, but if my prana is high, I would say,
mm,
wow, new project. Hey, this is a great
mm,
opportunity. I can learn new skills. I can get promoted faster. So the same
uh-huh.
situation, actually, the same event can be viewed completely differently depending on
Mm.
our level of prana. So I completely
I hope
agree
your
with
boss
this.
doesn't listen to this and give you more work. So, uh, but
I hope
and
he does, and he's going to send me to more meditation courses to increase my prana.
uh, but right there, right, Pavel, as I really like the fact that you brought up that example, because it's it the switch can be, correct me if I'm wrong, sometimes, right, it's, you can literally have something presented to you and you can be like, I don't want to do this. Or you can be like, okay, I can do this. And that's where I feel the mind and the prana, they are constantly talking to each other, right? And
Mhm.
sometimes it is, there's this thought of mind over body, right? Mind
Yeah.
over matter.
Mhm.
I actually sometimes think it is mind over prana, and prana over the mind or the body sometimes, because it's I feel like there's a closer connection there that we don't explore as much. And you know
Yes.
this, there are different types of prana. We've done an episode also about the different types of prana on the podcast, and it influences every layer of our existence. So
Mhm.
can I ask you about our thoughts a little more? Okay. And these, I've always said, I have the easy job, the guests have the harder job. What is the purpose of a thought? Like, why are we have so many thoughts, some 60,000 thoughts a day or something, some random number. I haven't really looked it up recently. But what is the purpose of a thought? Like, is there even a purpose of a thought? I don't even know if there's an answer to that, but
okay, maybe before talk about that, I wanted
Sure.
to comment on a little bit on your what you said about the prana and the mind and mind over body and prana over body. All of this, I don't think it's one over another. It's all of these five levels, right? Coming back to this panchakosha, all of the 5 levels are connected, and they all kind of mutually impact each other.
Agreed.
How we feel in our mind, if we feel happy, that has a definite impact on our body. Our body is healthier, and the processes are all running smoother. And vice versa is also true. In fact, in Russia, I'm from Russia originally, and in Russia we have that saying that in healthy bodies there is a healthy mind. This is a very popular, folk saying that if you take care of your body well, that certainly has an impact on the mind. But there is one particular thing that sort of brings together that connection between body, prana, and mind. And that is the breath. And this is something that actually, again, is not very well known and not often talked about in yoga, even though we do pranayamas. But that function of breath, because if you think about it, breath actually, on the one hand, regulates the functioning of our body. Right? When we do more physical activity, we breathe faster. We do less, we breathe slower, and it sort of adjusts and helps our body to function in an optimal way. Breath is also, through pranayama, helps to bring in the prana and regulate the prana. So the function of many pranayamas is to regulate the prana, reduce the blocks in the prana. And breath at the same time also has a big impact on the state of our mind. Like you've probably noticed that there is a corresponding rhythm of breath for every emotion. Like when we are angry, we breathe kind of fast. And when we are sad, the breath is heavy. When we are happy, the breath is very deep. So for every emotion and for every kind of pattern of thought, there is a corresponding rhythm of breath. And it actually also works in the opposite direction, that by breathing in certain ways, that's again the benefits of pranayamas and on some other breathing techniques, is that we can at the same time regulate the body, the prana, and the mind through the breath. And that's again, I think, a big part of yoga, that learning the breathing techniques and how to use them in different situations.
I think the world fundamentally, and this is just me going off on a tangent, fundamentally has completely missed the ball on teaching us to breathe from a young age, and teaching us to really like how that controls everything that you're talking about, right? Your body, your breath, your mind, your emotions, your physical functions. And it is such a simple and free tool. And I've always thought this, Pavel, and maybe because, growing up in India, and contrasting it to the West, I feel like if the solution is very simple, people don't trust it. They don't want it. They expect it to be a little more complicated for it to actually work, if that makes sense. You tell people these are 10 different types of breathing techniques, they'll be more interested, instead of just saying, take a deep breath in, take a deep breath out. Do that 10 times. If you are anxious, it will help you in some way. People look for complicated solutions. Maybe capitalism plays into it. But if we were only taught, right, how to connect with our breath in schools, and there is grassroots movement happening here and there, but we wouldn't struggle so much as adults. And yoga has so much of this just sitting there, waiting for people to adapt it, take it. There's no question here, but every time we have conversations like this, it reminds me of how we complicate everything while it's actually so simple.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I actually teach some of the children programs as well for exactly this reason, that I feel like kids need it so much.
Mm-hmm.
I actually have a little anecdote to share about my
Please,
son,
go ahead.
who is now 11, and he learned. So I sent him to one of these classes that I couldn't teach it myself. He would not listen to me, but to another teacher. And he learned these techniques. He didn't really like it too much, but then after a while, he had this episode where he read some book and there was some like horror story, and he couldn't, fall asleep. And then I told him, hey, there is this breathing technique. Remember, you learned it. How about we do it? Just takes 3 minutes. And then we did that, and he could just fall asleep. Wow. And then from that day on, now for about last, a year and a half or 2 years, he's been doing this breathing every day, every evening. If we don't tell him, he will tell us, hey, let's go do the breathing. So I think once we expose the kids to those techniques so they can feel the benefit, that's now a tool for life that they will have.
No, that's actually... it's a wonderful story. And I'm glad that you are such a mindful, present parent who has all these tools at hand, and you can actually hand them down to your children, right? And there are times when it is people unknowingly indulge their children in more sensory distractions instead of giving their child sensory withdrawal. Do you know what I mean? Like, and
yep.
While I believe every parent is doing their best, it is yoga has so much for us as young children to move into, and I think the world needs more of it, to be honest. So I'm going to go back to my previous question. What is the purpose of a thought? Because I have very few people who I can ask this very difficult question to. And even if you say, I don't know, it's completely okay. Because honestly, I don't know what's the purpose of a thought. I feel the purpose of a thought is to take us somewhere in our spiritual journey. But all these thoughts, most of them, in my humble opinion, useless. What is the purpose of a thought? And is there a way to reduce at least the thoughts that don't serve us?
Yeah, a good question. I mean, this is sort of in that category of like, what is the purpose of like life, and the purpose of sky and air and water, and why do we have all these things? Yeah, I personally feel there is no specific purpose. This is just how the world is. Like about this thing, like thoughts and emotions. I feel it's better to wonder about them than to like ask about them. Like, wow, we have these thoughts. We have this thing called mind, and it's producing the thoughts. It's interesting to look a little bit more into like how the thoughts actually come. Like where do they come from?
Where do they come
from? Yeah, I feel if you think about it, it's really a combination of a certain input from the environment, like we see something, we hear something, and our memory. So something that we see kind of combines with our past experiences and impressions and patterns, and that generates a thought. And yeah, I don't think it's the goal of our life to remove all the thoughts around thoughtless. In fact, it's not possible as long as we actually live and go around again. And let's go and live, right? When there is nothing, it's dark, there is no inputs, we can't actually eliminate the thoughts, because any of the inputs from the environment will produce some thoughts for us. And that's really the goal of the mind is to do that, is to perceive and generate the thoughts. So I think one kind of aspect of this is that we shouldn't really be upset about having thoughts. It's just normal. It's normal. And along kind of those lines, I don't think it's the purpose of yoga is to remove the thoughts. There is this famous Yoga Sutra, right, from Patanjali Yoga Sutras, often gets quoted, Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha, which kind of literally translated, yoga is reducing the thoughts, eliminating the thoughts. And that may be part of it. Like, you can reduce the thoughts by reducing unnecessary inputs. Like, if after watching a horror movie you have a lot of nightmares, well, it's pretty easy. Do not watch horror movies.
Fair enough. Yeah.
So some of it you can reduce in that way, but it's really not the goal to eliminate the thoughts. So I think it's less about controlling the thoughts. It's more about not being controlled by the thoughts, which is sort of maybe a slight difference, but actually it's a very
good difference.
Big, yeah. So it's not, because what happens is when we have a thought is that often we just very quickly react and act on it. Like, I have a thought to get angry at someone and I just shout at them right away.
It's impulsive. You react.
I see some piece of chocolate and I feel hungry and I eat it. And then after that, we regret those actions. So that's kind of what is being controlled by the thoughts, is when our reactions are just very quick. But if we sort of tangle these two things apart, that we have a thought to do something, and then we have an action, and we put a little bit of space in between those two things, and able to more of respond in a conscious way rather than react, then that, I think, really what is meant by not being controlled by the thoughts. We can choose whether to get angry or not, whether to eat this or not. And I think that's what really Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha means, because the vittis actually is not just the thoughts, they are patterns. We have these patterns of behavior which are just so ingrained that we automatically do this. And not being controlled by those patterns, so removing those patterns so that we are, when the trigger comes, we are not automatically doing it, but we are conscious about it. So that way we can reduce the impact of the thought life.
I think you said it in passing, but I think it is important to stop a moment on it. You spoke about impulse and giving into impulse. And then you said how you should learn to respond and not react, right? Or catch yourself reacting, and over time learn to react less and respond more. And you want to find, I don't know if you said it this way, but you spoke about giving more space, more pause before just reacting, right? And I think that is such an important aspect of, for anybody who is doing yoga, to sometimes people wonder, right? Am I progressing? And am I growing in my yoga? And it's very easy to see if somebody's growing in asana, right? You can be like, do this asana. Okay, you're progressing. If we look at only physical progress without keeping the other layers in mind. But I like to always ask people, are you feeling like you are more patient with yourself and others around you? Do you notice that, you take a little extra time before, do you, again, in your words, do you react or do you respond? Do you have more compassion? Do you have more clarity? If you say, if you're sleeping better at night, let's just, little less anxiety in a difficult situation, you remember to take a breath. if you're doing these small things, your yoga is growing more than you know. Or you are growing into your yoga more than you know. And to use these
Yes.
internal markers more than something external, right? And this
Yes.
ability
Yes.
to, and in between. So again, me going off on a tangent, feel free to stop me at any point. Between react and respond, according to me, what comes in between there is reflection, right? In that pause, if you can reflect for a very quick moment, and you can substitute reflect with whatever else is better for you, but
Mhm.
it is that pause in between, that space, that gap that you were talking about. I think if we can increase that gap, we become more present, for lack of a better way of saying this.
Yes, yes, absolutely. You can call it reflection. I usually call it awareness
Nice. Okay.
in my classes. That requires a certain level of awareness and presence to be able to stop yourself in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And this is actually coming back to what we already discussed. This is very strongly related to the level of prana, to the level of energy. Because we are stressed when we are tired. Well, guess what? No awareness
So true.
is there. It's very easy to see. And when we are energetic, then that just happens automatically. It's not like an effort that we have to make. In fact, actually making an effort makes it worse.
Yes.
But this is just it just happens automatically. Yeah, actually, this reminded me about another interesting aspect. The mind is so fascinating, so many things to talk about.
Yes, so true.
Right. Another interesting aspect about the effort. Often the way how we approach. Suppose we have a certain thought that just keeps coming back again and again, and we just want to get rid of it. It often happens when we go to sleep, we want to sleep, but there is this nagging thought that just keeps us from falling asleep. And what we try to do is we try to push it away. But actually that's counterproductive, because this is another tendency of the mind, that what we resist persists. That the more we resist a certain thought, actually, the more, in a way, we think about it. And the more we think about it, the stronger it becomes. This is sort of how the patterns in our memory, in our mind, get established. The more we think about something, the more it gets established there. Like, suppose in a certain situation, we behave in a certain way, we get a certain result, we like it. Well, the next time the situation comes, the thought will come to behave in the same way. And then after you do it for a while, this just becomes an automatic behavior. It becomes just so much part of ourself. And if we want to kind of rewind this to become free from these patterns, we sort of have to go in the opposite direction. That's where this awareness and not reacting comes from, is when the situation comes, we don't actually do what the pattern suggests we do. And then that pattern becomes a little bit weaker. And then the next time we do it again, it becomes a little bit weaker. And over time, we can free ourselves from these patterns.
I like how you said that the pattern slowly becomes weaker. And it's sometimes I also think people have such unrealistic expectations. They expect results very quickly. You have pattern, and you don't have patterns of a lifetime. You have patterns from previous lifetimes also, right? You're carrying that all with you.
Yes.
So I like how you said the pattern becomes weaker.
A long time. Yes.
Correct. And you said something again in passing. It doesn't work if you have to make an effort. In fact, if you feel like you have to make an effort, it becomes harder. And when it starts to really work, you said it a little better than I am, but when it really starts to work, it doesn't feel like effort. And these are such key markers for people to recognize. because then you really know if you're moving in a direction that will help you, versus just trying everything and not really experiencing anything.
And this is why that managing the mind at the level of the mind is very difficult, because you apply too much effort. Well, guess what? It's not actually helpful. You don't do anything. You just have lots of thoughts. It is very subtle, and that's why when I talked about the breath. So the breath is really a much easier way. Certainly for people who are just starting, it's much easier. And what you also said, that people tend to skip through pranayamas, just go to meditation. Well, meditation is essentially trying to manage the mind at the level of the mind as we sit and observe the thoughts, but it has to be done very subtly, without pushing it away. And it is difficult. Well, the breath is actually very easy. You just do the pranayamas and automatically the mind is calmer. Automatically the awareness is more. So that's the starting point.
I'm smiling because you said connecting with the breath is easy. But a lot of people struggle with that too. So then I say, okay, if you cannot find, your mind can't find your breath, go to asana. Find your arms and legs first. Then come from there to breath. From breath, go to, and I talk about how the yogis they arrange this so well for us, right? We just have to follow those instructions and go in that order. So what would be your top go-to if I had to say, okay, Pavel, give me a list of, you can change the number, 3 practices in yoga that will help manage our mind. Okay. And these could be specific techniques from your practice. This could be concepts from yoga. But what would be a few go-to practices to really improve the health and our managing our mind?
Yeah, if I were to pick just one practice, I would say this is out of all that I've sort of experienced across different styles of yoga over time, I would say the Sudarshan Kriya, so the technique that's taught in the Art of Living Foundation, which I also teach in my courses. That is kind of, I would say by far, it's almost stands in its own sort of a category in terms of effectiveness, because it's both easy and it has also, the effect of it is stronger than pretty much everything else. So that combination, it really makes it pretty much available to anybody in a very, very easy form. Yeah. Then the second thing, I would say that the physical aspect is also important, like you said, because often we do store stress in our body as well, not only in our minds. And in this awareness, actually, as we start practice yoga, people start noticing it. The stressful situation at work comes and we actually sit and the whole body is tense and the face is tense. There is so much tension in the body, and that impacts the mind. And the asanas are particularly, that's where I think the asana practice, the yoga practice is better than, say, going to a gym.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you and I are biased like that.
Yes, it allows to, it's not about, how many muscles you get, but it does allow to consciously release that stress in the muscles, and that has the calm, positive impact on the mind. So that would be the second, to add some physical yoga practice. Yeah, and then after that is, the third would be the meditation technique. I think there, I have my own preference. So the techniques that I practice, Sahaj Samadhi meditation, again, taught in the Art of Living. I think other meditation techniques can also work. I like Sahaj Samadhi because it sort of goes really well with the Sudarshan Kriya. It's the combination is designed for that combination. But the meditation, it sort of takes us to a deeper level. It's not just the calm mind, but really sort of experiencing some of the connections between these layers and having that more clear view of what's going on in our life.
Mm-hmm.
And more connection to other people also, because it's not just all about me. It's really about how can we create more harmonious environment, more harmonious world. So like that aspect comes in meditation. So that's, I would say, in that order.
Okay.
Me.
So Sudarshan Kriya, look after your body through asanas, and then explore meditation. Those three, are your. I knew Sudarshan Kriya would end up on your list. I was curious about the others. The fact that you said that we live in harmony with ourselves and with others, that's very important, because sometimes in modern incomplete yoga, right, like popular modern incomplete yoga, it has somehow become very I, me, myself. But yoga was never I, me, myself, right? If you look at the yamas, right, it is you with the community, you with, like, how are you showing up for yourself, and how are you interacting with everything, insects, birds, animals, people, things around you. So it was never meant to be in isolation. So I like how you said it is in harmony with yourself and those around you.
Yes, I think what you said about the harmony, I feel also is very important. In fact, yoga actually comes from the word yuj, which means union. So literally the meaning of yoga is to achieve that union, and the union is sort of all-encompassing. It's not just about body and our own body and mind. And to kind of to achieve that union, it is at all levels. It's at the physical level, which is more about personally, say we have a physical illness or a physical problem, and that creates a certain unhappiness, and we want to do something, but we cannot. And that the physical, the asana part of yoga helps to achieve that union. Then at a mental level, like we want to do something, but and we know what's the right thing to do, but we don't want to do it. And there is this constant struggle, like, should I eat this piece of cake on the table in front of me, or I shouldn't if I'm on a diet? And actually, regardless of the decision, there is a struggle, there is a conflict in the mind. And then, of course, the union with the environment, which is as we go through our daily life, through different situations, how are we impacting those situations? There is more harmony, more union due to our impact, or we are creating more conflicts in other people's minds and in situations. And that's all, to me, aspects of yoga. And as we progress on the path of yoga, we should be seeing more reduction in the conflicts that we create.
We should be seeing reduction in our inner conflicts and with people around us, which is so true. Definitely. This is it's wonderful to have you on the podcast. This has been long overdue, and I know you will come back for part 2. I will link to where the listeners can find you, where they can connect with you. But I want to give you homework for the next episode. And I'm going to say it publicly, that you will have an Instagram account by the time we launch this episode or the next one.
Already done. I have an Instagram account already.
Oh, you do? Okay, wonderful. For listeners who don't know, the last time Pavel and I connected in person, because we live in the same city, we were talking. I was telling him he's got to be more visible on social media. So this is me just pulling his leg on that one. You have an Instagram account, then I should be following you on that one soon.
Yes, you have to give me some homework to post something. I post like once every few months.
Oh my gosh. Okay, this we'll do over a cup of coffee again and give you a crash course on all of this. Thank you so much for being here, for talking about the mind and all things yoga. A lot of these questions are not easy to answer. So I'm always very thoughtful as to who I ask these questions to. And it's not one conversation that can cover everything. And it requires unpacking and layers of reflection and thinking and analyzing all of this. So thank you for doing this. I hope to have you back. And we should meet in person soon.
Yes, very happy to be here. These are some of my favorite things to to talk about. I can certainly talk about yoga and mind for like hours and hours. So happy to share my thoughts and my experiences.
Wonderful. Thank you, Pavel.
Yeah, you're welcome.
As always, everything you hear on the podcast is available in our show notes. We also have YouTube versions of these episodes that are up on our Aham Yoga channel. I appreciate your support, your sincerity in learning and understanding yoga. I will be back next week. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.